All right, so we're going to share some about the trial as we are kicking off. And I know many of you have, in fact, already started. I actually have some as well. This is the first time that we're doing one of these live kickoffs. So we're really glad that you're joining in for beta testing of this new model. And we want to share a little bit about the trial itself and why you all are so important to us in this citizen science data collection adventure, as well as some about the trials. And then we're going to share some about some of the changes that we made as far as data collection that we hope are responding well to feedback. And we want to, visit with you and answer any questions that you have. So we're going to try to keep this low key. And certainly if you have any questions, we'll have time at the end. We also have the chat box open. So just hop in there anytime. And before I get too excited and just start talking endlessly about vegetables, let Virginia introduce herself in case some of y'all may not have met her before.
Oh yeah, I'm Virginia Sykes. I am an associate professor in plant sciences, and I've been here all along, but probably you all have mostly seen Natalie. She's definitely the face of the home garden variety trials. But I work with Natalie on this as a co-PI, and I do a lot of the background work with the data analysis. So once all of that comes in, I analyze it and put it together into that report that you guys see at the end of the year. And so I'm going to be talking to you some more about the surveys later and how those have changed and how we utilize that data so that we can get good results that we can share with everybody at the end of the season.
Yes, and what you may not know is that 8 years ago or whenever we started this was Virginia's idea, and the other part of her extension position is actually running corn and soybean and forage and cover crop trials, but she is a horticulturist on the evenings and weekends, and so it's been a fun collaboration. She brings the flowers and the crops, and I bring the vegetables. So we mostly, want to see faces and visit with you, share with you why you are so valuable to this project. I, of course, am always excited to talk about vegetables, and Virginia's going to share some about the data. So as we think about this trial, I know some of you have been with us since the very beginning. Well, 2017 was our very first trial year with just beta testing year, and we just had about 40 Master Gardener volunteers, and we're up to a couple hundred people now all across the state. And some of you may be joining in for the very first time. So there are lots of ways that this project can do what we as researchers or extension personnel could never do by ourselves. And I just came up with 3. There are probably more, but the 3 that we often think about the most is we have the opportunity to grow all across the state. So, we can only grow in a few research centers. We have 10 spots, but our programs can't be in 10 spots. So most of the time we would only have a couple of different sites. But with 185 people all across the state, we have the opportunity to be in a huge number of counties. And so if y'all are in East Tennessee, Appalachian vegetable growing country, we are almost completely green. And every time I talk to West Tennessee, I'm like, hey, we've got a few white counties. So jump in and expand this map. The second thing that you enable us to do that we can never do without you is really get a picture of what crops look like in different sites and systems, whether it be recycled object containers or whether it be, very large backyard gardens. The detail and the variety that we get in these sites are something that we could never do just on research stations. And this one might actually be the most fun in the sense that you provide feedback that we just don't have the opportunity to capture in trials. And that is how things really cook and how they taste and whether the okra gets tough and fibrous. So there are lots of different attributes that you share that we would never have the opportunity to capture because I won't speak for Virginia. She actually has kids and they need to eat frequently, but I'm terrible at actually cooking the vegetables that we grow. So when you share information about canning and things like that, those are types of details that we literally wouldn't get any other way. I did put a picture in there of those are my own green beans right there. And occasionally I do torture my friends and family by having them eat. And every time I cook, right, they just have to be in like little different piles for the different trials, and they have to eat a bite of this and a bite of this. Um, so the opportunity to really get eater data is a pretty cool element. Okay, so I'm just going to give a little bit of a quick snapshot of what our 2024 trials look like. This is what they look like in March, and now they are actually growing into plants. All over the state. So we always do some bush beans, and this year we have a newer cultivar, Magnum, as well as an old heirloom, which is Buff Valentine, also known as Contender. So Magnum we actually had in the trial last year, did pretty well. We're really going for taste in these bush beans because that's the Appalachian criteria for beans, and because a lot of the newer cultivars are really being bred more for mechanical harvest, which is good for productivity, but it may not be the traditional bean flavor. 2 All-American Selections winners are in our pole bean trial. Kentucky Blue there on the right, which was a 1991 AAS winner, and then Seychelles, which is a much newer AAS winner. I think it's from 15 or 16 or 17 in the very recent past. This is one that I want to say, I don't know if John is on here, but we have one of our longtime trialers who has been telling me for a few years, we really need to do a dwarf okra. It is time to do this. And so Baby Bubba was a little bit hard to get a hold of seeds and things like that. But we have dwarf okra in our trial this year. There aren't that many compact okra, and so this was hard to get a comparison for, but we were able to find an older cultivar called dwarf long green pod. So Baby Bubba, we have grown. We have good information on. I'm really curious to see what our comparison cultivar will look like for this trial. For our slicer cucumber, Gateway is a really disease-resistant cultivar, a new one. And then we're trialing a little bit more of a thin-skinned cucumber to really look at kind of the bitterness aspect and taste quality. If you grew cucumbers last year, you knew that the heat that we had was just really challenging for bitterness, but it provided a really good comparison for our cultivars, because if we had a low bitter cucumber last year, then that was really saying something. This is the first time that we've done an entirely burpless cucumber trial. So if you've grown with us for a while, you may have grown Tasty Green in previous trials, but it was trialed against a more traditional slicer. It did very well, but it was just different than the trial that it was compared against. So it is Tasty Green is there on the right, and pretty good disease resistance, pretty good productivity, but we decided to trial it against a really accurate comparison of a burpless cucumber that was very similar to it. This is one that I'm excited about. For the first several years, we didn't do tomatoes because we'd have to send out seeds, and then there's transplants, and then there were challenges. And you all kept saying, we just need to do some tomatoes. Send us some tomatoes. And so this, I think, is going to be our 3rd year of container tomato trials, and this year we're doing more like a traditional slicer. And so this is kind of a little bit like old school, new school. So if you have been growing tomatoes for a while, Better Bush was one of the most early, like in garden centers type of compact tomato that's been available for a long time. I mean, I know when I was a teenager working in greenhouses, my mom always used to say, bring home some tomatoes when it's time to plant the garden. And I would only bring home Better Bush because I knew that my dad didn't like to build tomato cages and my mother didn't like to stake. And so this was all we grew because it was the only one that didn't need a lot of management. Home Slice is a much newer cultivar from Pan American Seeds. And so these are both going to be pretty compact determinate plants. I've grown Home Slice in my in-field trials. And so we certainly hope that this grows well for you. And I'll be curious to kind of see what people are finding. So, we always do some green zucchini. This year we tried to make them look different with a striped one and a solid one. It's the first time that we've really selected for a more compact zucchini, and I hope that in fact these are at least somewhat compact, and that I don't get comments at the end of the season that was like, y'all said that was compact, but I was overrun by the zucchini over the course of the summer. But these can both be eaten when fairly small, so I'm excited to see about the bush baby. That's a new one. I have not actually grown that one before. Our winter squash has been a challenge in previous years because they are a long season crop and they are a large crop. But we want to keep trying and getting some new options in there. So Tahitian butternut was actually a suggestion by one of our trialers, which we absolutely took that feedback, and also we're trialing against a Hubbard squash, which hopefully is productive, but if it's not, then it can be your trap crop for squash vine borers. So that's our winter squash. And then I saved the most fun pictures because I actually took these today. These are what the trial looks like. I have a few growing in our greenhouse right now. I have a couple of thrips in the greenhouse, so that's what the little brown spots are. That is not disease, but these are our basil trial. This is Prospera Red, which has both fusarium and downy mildew resistance. It's a newer hybrid. And then dark opal over here on the right. And you can see what has always been one of our challenges with red leaf basil is that it is not all red leaf. And so you kind of get a little bit of green reversion on some of those. And that'll be really interesting to see, if one or the other of these maintains its anthocyanins, its red pigments better. But so far we're seeing a little bit more robust growth out of that dark opal. Here again are the dills, and these are in my little hydroponic system, which is like literally just right across the parking lot right here. That is fernleaf on the left and teddy on the right. Hopefully you are going to be able to grow these in containers because these are both fairly compact dill. So whether you want it for the kitchen or whether you want it for pollinators, we're excited to try these. Fernleaf, I think, is some of these are All-American selections. And now we get to flowers, which is always Virginia's favorite part of the trial. And once again, these are going to be dwarf or container appropriate trials. And both of these I have grown in field plots before. So this is Firecracker and this is Teddy Bear. So hopefully we'll have some fun with those. And we also are growing zinnias. So let me tell you the cool thing about the zinnias that we're growing this year is that some of us, in Extension, have a cut flower project right now that we are doing field trials to provide data for cut flower growers. It's a huge, new, booming area of interest for our small scale horticulturists. And you all, as our home garden variety trialers, are growing some of the same cultivars that we're growing in Jackson and in Knoxville for our in-field fertility trials. So this is cactus. It makes in the center there some really cool types of modified flowers, there. And then these are both Bennery, large Bennery. So that's the all vol collection right there that I grew last year, really pretty white and really pretty orange. So you're going to be a part of data that will actually support home gardeners, but also give us context as we share with potentially even new cut flower growers. Then we have beets. I don't have any beets growing right now, but some novel colors there. And for our last regular trial, we're also growing kale. So that is Black Magic there on the left, Prism on the right. This is also a picture that I just took this afternoon. So we kind of have a Toscano type of kale as well as a traditional. Prism is an All-American Selections winner, a nice compact cultivar. So hopefully you are also having some good success with some of these early growth of the cool season crops. And then this is another one. I think Virginia's probably been telling me for years that we need to grow some tiny cucumbers. So our youth cultivars this year are Mini Me there on the right, which I have not grown before. That's a new one for me. And then on the left is Diva, which many of us have probably grown. It's probably one of the most familiar thin-skinned cucumbers. And so we sent out 100 trials of these youth Snack-Your cucumbers. So they were a very hot commodity in the trial. And then this is my last slide, and then I'll turn the floor over to y'all if you have questions, and to Virginia. So just a few notes that we'll talk about. When you got your little packing slip, it had a trialer number on there. We're hoping that makes it easier. You can just fill that out when you turn on the online survey, so you don't have to constantly type your name in on stuff. We sent you, hopefully, a record keeping sheet that made it easier to keep track of things. And there's going to be 2 evaluations instead of 1.
And so, as Natalie mentioned, we've got this split up into 2 surveys this year. Before, we had everything in one big survey, and we were finding that for some people, it was challenging once you got to the end of the season and you were harvesting things to think back on, well, which of these did germinate the best? And in some cases, which plant did I actually have growing here? So before we even go into surveys, I would say, be really diligent about labeling your rows so that you do know what is in each location. And then we also recommend drawing a map just so that you know, okay, I had this trial planted here and this variety, because going back afterwards and trying to figure it out based on what they look like can be challenging. So we have our first trial evaluation, which is the early to mid-season, and this is going to focus mainly on how things actually did. As Natalie said, we've got trial numbers this year. If for some reason you lose your trial number, it is fine to put your name here. We can line that up with your information, but we would prefer to have the trial number just because it makes it logistically a lot easier to match up data. Your county is really important because that is how we update the map. And really, we prefer your county here, not your city or your state, since, well, most of you are going to be in Tennessee. We actually do have some, oh, hold on a second. My Outlook has decided it wants to restart. No. We do have some from other states. Most of them are in Tennessee, but we like to have that county there so we can update the map. And some of our cities in Tennessee are in 2 different counties. So this is important for us to update that map. How many years you've been vegetable gardening? This is really just for our information. It doesn't go anywhere in the report. We have done a research publication that kind of lined up gardening practices with how many years people had been gardening. And so it might eventually go into some type of research publication, but probably won't end up in the actual extension publication that you will see at the end of the season. Same thing with this. How did you grow your plants? How were your plants fertilized? In some cases, we can line that data up with how well certain things did. So that might be able to give us better ideas for what we could recommend for container plants versus plants that are in soil versus plants that are in raised beds, because some things are going to do better in each of those different situations. So helpful to have that information in there as well. This part is what gives me the most headache, I would say, at the end of the season. So you do have to choose both your trial 1 variety and your trial 2 variety. Now, the easiest way to do this is if I'm going to say I'm looking at my trial 1, I'm evaluating that. I'm just going to pick 1 and 1. We have had some situations where people will pick 1 for the first variety and then they'll pick something totally different for the second variety. And then we have to throw that data out. So we don't want to have to throw out any data. We want to be able to utilize everything that you all do throughout the season. So do be sure that you pick both of the same trial. So when you click next, that is going to auto-populate right here those 2 varieties that you're looking at and that you're comparing. And here, this is just a simple comparison of which one you thought did better or whether you thought there was no difference. And so if I thought that these both germinated about the same, Magnum was faster and had healthier plants, and they were the same for the first fruit or flower. So very simple, very straightforward, just a paired comparison, which one did better. And then down here is where you'll enter whether you had any issues that would prevent future evaluation. And so this is another reason why we broke it up into 2 surveys, because we found that some people, when they had an issue, like a total plant loss because of insects or things that happen later in the season, then they wouldn't fill out the trial information. And really, it's still important for us to have that. Which one germinated best? What data did you collect? Could you collect before that trial failed? And so we want to make sure that we're still capturing all of that data prior to that trial failure. So if we say our trial did not fail, then we're going to go ahead and click ahead, and that's it. That's our early season survey. It's very simple, very straightforward. Now, when we go into our late season survey or end of the season survey, this is where you're going to put in that same information about your county and your trial ID. This is just an estimate of how many pounds of produce you got from your trial. Do you think we could add a not applicable, or I don't want to answer here, Natalie? That might be helpful. Some people might have no idea.
Yes, I think we could do that.
Okay. Then again, you're going to select your trial. Make sure it's the same trial number, 1 and 1. It's going to populate your 2 varieties. And then it's the same thing as that first season survey, only now we're looking at which one yielded better, which one produced the longest, which one was the most attractive, and which one tasted better. And again, you just pick which one you liked best. If they both seemed about the same, then you can collect the same. Now for things like flowers, obviously we're not harvesting those as something that we can eat, but you can say which of these had the highest number of blooms. So which one had the most flowers on it for that yield question. And then taste better, just click the same because that one's not applicable for the flowers. All right, and then this is a new question too. How many days were there from seeding to transplanting? I think that's probably just because Natalie is curious, and again, for recommendations. And then your overall performance of each cultivar. And this information we use to designate our top performers. So anything that gets rated a 7 or higher is going to go into our Tennessee top performers list if it averages out a 7 or higher. So if you want to see it in that list, then make sure that you give it a 7 or higher. So we'll analyze that data, and things that are low performing, we're not going to include on our recommendation list for Tennessee. And then, would you recommend these cultivars? So just think about if a neighbor asked you whether you would grow this again or whether you would recommend them growing that, and then why specifically. So you can say it's because I would recommend this because it tastes better than anything else. So having that sort of specific reason why you would recommend it is helpful. And then any additional comments, we always enjoy reading these. And this is where we get some of those specifics that might not be covered in that survey information, like these were great for pickles and my kids love these, and lots of information like that. Sometimes we get the raccoons loved these, and so I didn't get to taste them, but at this point now, hopefully we will have covered that in that previous survey. And then once all that data comes in, I start analyzing it, and our report comes out as soon as I can analyze all that data and get it through our marketing department. So the sooner you guys get data back, the sooner we can get that report out to everyone. And so I would say you can go through, because these are trial by trial, like you don't have to wait until all of your trials are done. Like you don't have to wait until your winter squash is done to start evaluating some of these other things. So feel free to go ahead and evaluate some of these just as you reach that sort of peak yield period. Any questions specifically on this survey?
Well, I was actually gonna follow up with where you were just going, I think, Virginia, and say the most common question that I've gotten is about timing on these mid and end. And so I can give my opinion, and you can share. I feel like the first one is primarily about germination and early growth. So once they're up and going, I would go ahead and just get the first one done. Or if they're not up and not going, then your first one is all you need to do. You won't have to do an end of the season one.
Yep. And then when would you recommend for them to do the second one? Because you could go pretty late.
Well, I mean, for a lot of the cucumbers and squash and things like that, lots of times you'll know pretty well in July, maybe even June for some of the cool season ones. And we typically try to have all of the data in by about the middle of October. As always, if you run into questions or anything that we can help with throughout the season. Oh, I had one other thing I wanted to share. So our horticulture team does like a once a month summertime, we call it Friday office hours. And it's kind of a Q&A about, gardener landscape issues that folks are having. And so our first one of the season is going to be June the 14th, and then we have one in July. And what I'm going to do is, take some video and of the trials that I'm doing of our trials. And then if you all have any specific issues or challenges that have to do with the trial, we're going to kind of do a home garden variety trial spotlight segment in that garden Q&A in June and July. So y'all are welcome to join in on that. And I'll send you the information in the email, and we'll also kind of use that as a soft recruiting for other people who may not be doing the trial that are a part of that horticulture session. So a little bit of cross promotion there.
I think we're good. The only thing I'll say is I'm disappointed that you just said cross promotion and not cross pollination.
Well, I'm glad that you corrected my missed pun opportunity. I feel like that is the best geeky way that we can end this call. So thank you very much for joining in with us. Good to see faces that go with your evaluations and with your seeds. So y'all have a fabulous rest of your afternoon, and good luck finding enough non-rainy weather to actually get some gardening done.